So the first speaker to start tonight is Alastair Redman, the Conservative candidate.
Thank you. Well, thank you very much, Dunoon. It is so good to see such a full hall. It's a great sign for our democracy. And I've said at every Hustings I've been to, whenever I see a full hall, it's a sign that since the referendum, democracy is alive and well, and really people are engaged, and it's great to see. It's also good to see so many young people. I've not been hugely interested in politics all my life, but perhaps it does comfort me greatly to see young people engaged. So thank you all for coming here. What I would say is I'm a local man from Argyll and Bute. I'm from the island of Islay, and I run a small store and post office in Portnahaven. I know all too well the hassles rural communities have. I drive on the same god-awful roads you do. I suffer the same mobile phone roaming charges, endure poor broadband speed, and don't even get me started on the ferries. I know fine that Dunoon has for far too long had issues with ferries, and that must be resolved. Rural communities have been sidelined by the centralised parliaments. Whether it be London, whether it be Edinburgh, there's too much power brought to the centre. We need to see real local devolution. Argyll and Bute has been ignored, and this has to stop. This talk of generalisation, more powers to Scotland, more homes being built in Scotland, more of this in Scotland, more of that in Scotland. How much of it is getting to Argyll and Bute? That's what I want to hear as your candidate. And I feel I'd be a strong voice for the right kind of change here in Argyll and Bute. So I hope you'll give me your full consideration, because it's time we had change in Argyll and Bute. But let's make it the right kind of change. Let's end this constitutional merry-go-round and see real power devolve to the people. That is what I'd like to see. Thank you.
Thank you, Alastair. The second speaker is Brendan O'Hara for the SNP.
Good evening. I'm delighted to be in Dunoon this evening. This general election, let me be absolutely clear, is not a rerun of the referendum. It is not a rerun of the referendum, but what it is arguably one of the most important general elections that Scotland has ever faced, because it will shape Scotland's future and it will shape Scotland's relationship with the rest of these islands for many, many years to come. Because what we have at the moment, by an accident of parliamentary arithmetic, Scotland is in a uniquely powerful position. Labour and Conservatives, neither of them are going to win a majority in England, and we have an opportunity to have Scotland's voice heard at the very centre of the United Kingdom's power. There are four main planks that I've argued throughout this campaign. Firstly, delivery of the vow that was promised to Scotland in September. And the vow is, as Gordon Brown said, as near as we can get to being a federal state and the sharing of sovereignty across these islands. Secondly, an end to austerity, which is designed to and does hurt the poorest hardest. Thirdly, the non-renewal of Trident, for which there is no moral, no economic and no military case for. And fourthly, to secure a better deal for Argyll and Bute. That's what I'm standing on. I think the SNP have done well in government. I think the SNP have shown how they can work collaboratively in a minority administration. I think the SNP can bring a breath of fresh air to the dusty corridors of power in Westminster, working with other progressive forces across these islands to make life better, not just for us in Scotland, but for everyone across these islands. Thank you very much.
Thanks for that, Brendan. Third speaker is on extreme left, Caroline Santos from UKIP.
Good evening. My name's Caroline. I'm originally from Dunoon. I went to Dunoon Grammar School. Why UKIP? because UKIP are the only party fighting for the ordinary people of this country. I'm also a libertarian, and UKIP ticked most of them boxes for me. UKIP believe in local referenda, which would be a way forward to an outcome on the Castle Tower debacle, where Argyll and Bute Council are the council that like to say no. UKIP on exiting the EU alone will say on exiting the EU alone will save £52 million a day of your money, which would be better spent at home improving the quality of life here for everyone. We will lift people on low incomes out of the tax band, in other words, zero tax on minimum wage, giving people more money to spend in their pockets. We will also abolish the bedroom tax. And that's it.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Carolyn. Our next speaker is for Labour, Mary Galbraith. You don't need to stand up. You'll be easier here to stay seated. Well, everybody needs to stand up if we're going to do that, so I'd rather we just sat down and made it.
Right, the cameraman is saying stand up.
You want them up? Oh. Sorry, Alastair.
Okay. Good evening. Lovely to be back here in Dunoon. Not a stranger to this place, as many of you will know. What I'd like to say is that I believe Argyll and Bute deserves better. We deserve better representation in our parliaments, and we deserve better governments. For far too long, we've been treated like a backwater, forgotten about, on the wrong end of too many bad decisions. And what I'm offering in my candidacy is a chance to change this, to give us a better future. Because what we believe is that things can be so much better than they are right now. And what makes a country better happens to be what makes ordinary families better. When people are working successfully, when families are functioning successfully, then the country does better too. And our whole platform is built around practical policies that make a real difference to everyone's lives and will help the wider economy and the country as a whole. And I'd like just to give you a flavour of them now, and during the course of questions I'm sure there will be a chance to discuss more of them. We are absolutely proposing to increase the minimum wage, working towards the living wage. We've set a target for £8 by 2019, and that's our projection, because at the moment too many people are surviving on poverty pay. They're in work, but they're still having to claim benefits. What we also want to do is get rid of the insecure work that exists, primarily through the 0 hours contracts, and we would get rid of the exploitative ones. We'd also get rid of the bedroom tax, have a job guarantee for young people and for everyone who's long-term unemployed. A future fund for young people who don't go to college or university, but go straight from school to work. £1,600 for those young people, for their training and development, for driving lessons and other skills, other things for their CVs that help their future and their employability. We'd freeze energy bills starting this winter and change the tax rate to make the top payers pay their share and to lower the bottom rate. That's an example of what we'd offer, and I look forward to the rest of the evening and sharing with you more of what we plan. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And to wind up the initial speeches, the last at this stage, but no means the least, Alan Reid, who's been our MP, I think, since 2001. That's correct. Alan Reid for the Liberal Democrats.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you all very much for coming out tonight. I'm proud of what Liberal Democrats have achieved in government. A rapidly growing economy, 500 more jobs in Argyll and Bute over the past year, income tax cut by £800 for workers on low and middle earnings, the triple lock guarantee for pensioners that saw a pension increase double the rate of inflation this year. The budget deficit has been cut in half as a proportion of GDP. And very importantly, Liberal Democrats put the Highlands and Islands at the heart of government after years of neglect. As a result of that, we have seen fuel duty frozen and cut by 5 pence a litre on the islands. The rollout of superfast broadband, coming to Dunoon in June, and the rollout shortly thereafter of 4G mobile phone coverage. The Coastal Communities Fund, returning 50% of the Crown Estate's profits to communities in the Highlands and Islands. And in the last budget, an announcement of £30 off electricity bills in the Highlands and Islands. And make no mistake, all that only happened because of Liberal Democrats in government. During the 9 years I spent in opposition, the Labour government consistently refused all the demands from people in the Highlands and Islands for better services. The last 5 years, the tables were turned, and I enjoyed listening to Labour MPs sitting on the opposition benches moaning about Highlands and Islands Liberal Democrat MPs feathering our own nests. I'm proud of being accused of delivering benefits to my constituency, because that's what I was elected to do. Now, the job of recovering from the crash of 2008 is half done. Re-elect Liberal Democrats and let's finish off the job. And let's not be distracted by more debates on constitutional change. We had the independence referendum last year. Let's put that behind us. Let's not turn it into a never-endum.
Can you wrap up now, please, Alan?
Income tax down, pensions up, more jobs. That's our record in government. Re-elect Liberal Democrats to finish off the job that we have started so well.
Thank you very much indeed. Thank you all for that. I have some questions which were submitted to the Observer in advance, and we're now going to take a few of these and then we'll open it up to the floor thereafter. The first question I have is from Christine McClellan of Inellin, and she asks, what alternative energy sources do you think should be developed and supported in Argyll and Bute, and why? So can I ask Caroline Santos to come into that first?
Yep. I'm not a big fan of covering Scotland, and especially the Argyll and Bute wind farms, or Sitka spruce to be burnt down at Lockerbie to create energy. It's all subsidised by the taxpayer. I'm in favour of nuclear. I think it does a good job, and more money invested in nuclear, particularly down at Hunterston, is a way forward.
Thank you. Alan, would you like to respond to the question?
Well, as a world, we have to move away from fossil fuels towards renewables. And here in Argyll and Bute, I think we are well placed to contribute towards that. I mean, given our long coastline, then the potential for tidal power must be great. There's clearly still plenty of potential for small hydro. Wind, it still has a place to play. It's controversial. It's important that any future wind farms are put in the right place by the planning system. I mean, the one that's proposed for the hills behind Dunoon, that should be thrown out straight away. That's completely the wrong place. But I still think there is a place for wind in the right place, and there's probably also potential for offshore wind. Most of the offshore wind so far has been going in the more sheltered waters of the North Sea. I think there is potential out in the Atlantic, but I think that still needs further technology to be developed, because the technology as it stands at the moment, the wind towers couldn't really stand up to the Atlantic storms, but I think there is potential out there. I think the main source of potential would be small-scale hydro and tidal.
Thank you. Now going to ask Alastair Redman to respond.
Well, I've been, is this good to speak here,
Yeah?
I've actually been involved in a number of community issues when it comes to renewables. I actually am part of the Isla Energy Trust, which is a pro-renewables group. And on top of that, I have actually opposed certain renewables when done incorrectly. There was a plan for an offshore huge array of turbines near Portnahaven. And Isla would benefit nothing from this. It wouldn't be connected to the grid on Isla. It would perhaps be connected over in Ulster. It would be built on some of our most productive fishing reefs. So I was completely against it, as was the community, in fact. 300-strong petition, objection after objection. But unfortunately, our councillors, mainly Lib Dems and Nationalists, rolled over to the demands of central government. This is where the deficit is in Scotland right now when it comes to renewables. If the community says we want them, so be it. If the community says they don't want them, then the community should be listened to. Yet there is a one-size-fits-all policy. If you're renewables, no matter what, you get through, because that is a direct order from the Scottish Parliament, and that should not be the case. Local democracy should not be ignored. I think there is a place for renewables, absolutely. And another thing is grid capacity. As it stands, we had tidal energy in Portnahaven, recently been decommissioned because it never worked to full capacity because there was no proper grid connection. That's another thing that needs looking at. Tidal, wind, solar, they're all good and they're all sensible as part of an energy mix. However, local communities should have the power to veto them and not be overridden by the authoritarian Scottish Parliament. Thank you.
Thank you, Alastair. Brendan, would you like to come in at this stage?
Yeah, absolutely. I think that Scotland has the potential to be the sort of green, clean energy capital of Europe, but it'll take a huge investment, and it'll only happen over time. I think with tidal power and with wind power, Scotland can, given time, generate enough of its own energy to eventually export far and wide, and it's a goal that we should all strive to. But on the way, we've got to be very, very careful and very mindful of community concerns. And I was here about a month ago when the Forestry Commission met with the community to discuss the Back-in-Burn wind farm, and that's a classic example of something that has been pushed through. And I know that PNE, they've come back again, and it's a loophole which is being exploited by wind farm energy companies. When the community doesn't want it, then it really has to be listened to. And I know that I wouldn't have liked to have been the chap from the Forestry Commission that day. He was given a bit of a rough time, but the community was very clear in what it said, and I think the community has to be listened to. But that doesn't mean that the principle of renewable energy or the principle of wind farms is wrong. And I agree with Alan that we've got to move away from fossil fuels, but while we cannot just draw the line under fossil fuels, and I would suggest as well that on the west coast of Scotland there is a vast reservoir of fossil fuel, vast reservoir of oil, which currently is untapped, and it's untapped because of Ministry of Defence objections to any drilling because of submarines. So when next time they tell you, that Trident is a great boon or a great boost to the Scottish economy, actually what the truth is that we have been stopped from developing oil and gas fields in half of our waters because of the Ministry of Defence. So yes, let's get away from fossil fuels, but fossil fuels are still important, and I think a good mix of both fossil fuel and renewable energy, and Scotland has a very, very bright future. Excuse the pun.
Thanks, Brendan. The last word on this question is going to Mary Galbraith.
Yeah, and all the people on the platform have said things which I could pick and mix and agree with some of what people have said. Wind has got potential, but probably not as much as we all thought it did 10 years ago because of the environmental concerns and because fundamentally it's inconsistent. Long days, often in really calm winter days, no wind when the energy demand is highest, so it's not ideal. And therefore, what we probably need to do is look much more and put some serious investment into some of the definite energy sources that we know we have around wave and tidal. Communities need to be involved in all of these as well. We also need to realise that solar has got far more potential than people think it would have in the west of Scotland. Solar is a massive issue. Tyree, for example, has got more sunlight hours than many other parts of the UK, and we need to look at serious large-scale solar as well as the individual household solar, and that requires input into the grid as well. Grid connection matters. But I think we need to be creative also about some of the other ones. Very recently talking to somebody locally, pointing out that among all the peninsulas that we have are either are races, are tidal races. We know about Corryvreckan and the Falls of Laura, for example, which are beautiful areas. But other infrastructure investments that we might choose to do around bridges, around fixed links, around Argyll and Bute, also have the potential, something that's used in many other parts of Europe, to associate with them renewable energy, tidal methods to capture the tide in conjunction with the physical infrastructure investment that would go in for, as I say, bridges or other types of investment, so that you can offset some of the cost of the infrastructure investment with the capacity to generate power through those. It's a model that's been used in other parts of the world. It's a model that I think we could look at here. Another thing that I strongly endorse is the idea that the local communities who are enduring this new infrastructure and this new investment beside them need to be involved, and that all proper environmental and fish migration impacts need to be assessed. Thank you.
Thank you. We have a second question, which is, well, I'll take a couple of comments rather than questions, if you like, if you've got comments you want to make. Did everyone catch that?
Yeah.
The question is, what did the other candidates think about nuclear, and the basis that Brendan talked about it? And can we just give you can you just make a quick comment each of the other four? Was it Caroline that talked about it?
Yeah.
Sorry.
I did, yeah, no, I'm a big supporter of nuclear. I think it's the way forward. It's safe. Sorry, all right. Yeah, I'm a fan of nuclear. I'm not a fan of subsidy. Sort of wind farms are all subsidised by the taxpayers. Sorry, I was the only one on the panel that mentioned nuclear. Yes, I'm all for nuclear. I think there should be more investment in it. Sorry, I can't hear. I can't hear you, sorry.
Can we stop shouting out, please?
All right, there's been one incident in 30 years.
It doesn't help that people shout out. Can you let the candidate speak?
Yeah, there's been one incident in 30 years, and we've learned from that incident. There's never been any incidents here in the UK. You know, oh God, I'm just being heckled.
Can we just come down very briefly? Just
I think the nuclear power industry are the subsidy junkies of the energy industry. They are subsidised to the hilt, and there have been incidents here. Wind scale, just because you rename Windscale Sellafield doesn't make their history disappear. Nuclear power is fundamentally unsafe, and it's unsafe for thousands and thousands of years. You know, it may create energy, it may create eventually cheap energy, but at what cost, and at what cost to future generations? And I am fundamentally opposed to nuclear energy.
Well, I'm very much in favour of nuclear. I think it's a good part of our energy mix. I think it's sustainable. I think it's clean. And of course, wind and solar are not only subsidised, but they're erratic. They don't work all of the time, and they do cost a lot of money. All energy is subsidised, it's true. Nuclear to a lesser extent. Do I want us to be dependent on one particular type of energy, whether it be fossil or renewable or anything? No. I want an energy mix, and I support nuclear as being part of that.
Can we let the candidate speak, please? We've had a question asked and they're responding to it.
What we also need in all of these mixes, in all of these various forms that we have, is energy security. And at the moment, in the UK and in Scotland, we have three types of energy. We have renewables, including hydro and wind and all the rest of it. We have coal and gas-fired energy, i.e. fossil fuels, which we know we're trying to reduce our reliance on, and we have nuclear. And these three are effectively like three legs of a milking stool. Take any one away and the thing falls down. At the moment, we cannot survive. We can't meet our energy requirements with only two of those. What we need to do is wean ourselves off the carbon generating fuels, the fossil fuels, and find more and better and more efficient renewable forms. Until we've done that, Even people in the Green Party and the ecology movement recognise that because nuclear is a low-carbon energy form, that we're going to need it for a while. So, as our energy mix has changed over the years, and as we need energy security, we don't all want to go home and find there's no power. We need the energy security. I support that mix, but to try A, wean ourselves off nuclear, B, find more reliable forms of renewable, wean ourselves off the carbon forms, get more reliable forms of renewable so that we can wean ourselves off the other forms. That's my philosophy.
Thanks, Mary. Alan, just a comment from yourself.
Yeah, nuclear has to be part of the mix. I mean, the most important thing is that we have to get away from using fossil fuels. We have to decarbonise our economy because we're destroying the climate. So that has to happen. Now, we cannot power our whole economy from renewables. That means that nuclear has to be part of the mix. Hopefully, in many years to come, renewables will power the whole of our economy, but that's not going to be the case in the foreseeable future. So in order to meet the international decarbonisation targets that we've signed up for and keep the lights on, we have to achieve both those objectives. We must have nuclear as part of the mix. Otherwise, either the lights will go off or we'll just destroy our climate.
Thank you. I'm going to move on and take one of the other submitted questions. It's by all means raise the point again if you want to when we come to questions from the floor, which we'll try and do in about 15-20 minutes time. But the next question I have is from a George Johnson from Dunoon. George has in fact posed 4 questions, and therefore I'd ask the candidates to refrain from getting into any long list, but try and restrict themselves to predominant issues. They're fairly personal type, questions fairly personal. It says, when were you selected by your party to stand in this election for Argyll and Bute? What issues have you found by speaking to voters here, and what have you done about their concerns? How will this inform you should you become our MP in Westminster? So it's a linked question, and can I ask, Mary, would you like to?
Okay, certainly. I'm pleased to say I was the first of all the candidates in front of you to be selected. The Labour Party started its selection process almost 2 years ago, and I was selected in the second half of 2013. And immediately after I was selected, I made myself really busy, hectic schedule, getting round lots of communities to hear what people had to say. And if I can illustrate my approach in answering this question, one of the first things that people told me was that services were being withdrawn, in particular maternity services. I met young women who told me about how they had to spend hours, sometimes days, travelling to Glasgow, to Paisley and to Greenock to get a 20-minute scan. Many of these women and their partners are self-employed and lose earnings when they do that. And these are services that used to be delivered in 6 different hospitals in Argyll and Bute, in Dunoon, Rothesay, Campbelltown, Lochgilphead, Isla and Oban. And those services now exist in none of those places. I think that's unacceptable. My approach was to find all the facts, engage with the health board, lobby hard to get that changed, to mobilise the women who'd talked to me about it and were upset about it, ran a petition and tried to get publicity, because this is not acceptable. Withdrawing vital health services that everyone needs is not the way to proceed. So my approach is to get out there, hear what people say, work with them to campaign, lobby and make the changes that we need, because we need those services here, or our communities will die away and our young people won't want to bring up their own families here.
Thanks, Mary. I'd like to ask Brendan O'Hara now to comment.
Yep. I was probably the last of the 5 to be selected. I was selected in February of this year. Clearly, given the referendum, the SNP had held off deciding on what it would do. So the selection process started just before Christmas and was concluded in early February. I've been in every part of the constituency umpteen times since. It's a vast area, and if there's one thing that keeps coming back time and time again, and it should come as no surprise to a Dunoon audience, it's the ferries question. Everybody wants to know what's happening with the ferries. Everybody believes that, you know, things could be better and things should be better. And what am I doing about it? Well, I was on Isla a week past Thursday, when there was scenes of absolute chaos on the island because both the ferries had broken down one after the other. I arrived at the terminal to buy my ticket, and the girl behind the counter said to me, "You're not taking your car." And it was only later I realised that actually wasn't a question. And what they were trying to do was trying to get 5 sailings onto 3 boats, and it was absolute chaos. And I immediately spoke to Michael Russell, and we spoke to the Transport Minister, and tomorrow I'm going through to Edinburgh to meet with Derek Mackay, the Transport Minister, to talk precisely about the issue of the ferries here in Dunoon and across Argyll and Bute, because, you know, it's a lifeline service. It has to be run correctly, and when it doesn't run correctly, there has to be compassion shown by CalMac and how they deal with extremely upset locals, businesses and holidaymakers, because if we don't have that, then we have nothing. So being part, I think, of a joined up process between our MSP and the Scottish Government, I intend that way to get things done. It's not a...
Can you wind up, Brendan?
Absolutely accept that it's a 100% devolved issue, but it doesn't mean that I'm going to turn my back on it, and I will work, as I say, go to see Derek Mackay tomorrow and hopefully have an answer.
Thank you. Alan, would you like to come in?
Well, I was selected 18 months ago. During that time, I mean, the issues have changed over the time. In the last few weeks, the issue that I keep finding coming up time after time on the doorstep is the question that people thought was settled last year, and that's the independence question. I find a significant minority of people tell me that they want a rerun of the referendum and they want independence. But the majority of people are telling me that they don't want another referendum. They want that question put behind us. Well, I only hope it is done. But of course, we all know that we all know that the SNP are just agitating to have another referendum as quickly as they can. Now, that I only wish it was rubbish, and I take it that everybody is shouting rubbish.
Can we just keep calm in the audience and let them finish what he's got to say?
I presume everybody that's shouting rubbish will be arguing against ever having an independent referendum
this is an election for people to go to Westminster. It's not about a referendum. Can we keep calm, please? I don't want people shouting out. It just spoils the evening for everybody. Alan, would you like to just carry on now?
Yeah. Now, the other issue that people are very concerned about are the SNP's policy of full fiscal autonomy. That is to take £7.6 billion. That's to take £7.6 billion out of the Scottish economy.
Please, will you let the candidate answer the question? He is answering the question. He's telling you what he heard on the doorstep.
The gentleman asked me what I want to do, and what I want to do is implement the Smith Commission agreement. That was the agreement signed up by all 5 parties in the Scottish Parliament. That is what I want to do, and I want to put the constitutional change behind us, and I want to oppose the SNP's plans to take this extra £7.6 billion out of the Scottish economy, equivalent to 14 pence on the pound income tax rise. That is the threat that we're faced with. Now, here in Dunoon, the policy that comes up time after time is the complete shambles the Scottish Government, the SNP, have made of the ferry service. It's a complete disgrace. The bathtub boats on that route, and that is entirely
Can we have silence, please, and let him finish?
Down to the SNP.
Alan, the time's up anyway, if you like to. Right. If we get all this shouting out, I'm actually going to ask people to ask you to leave, because this is not on. They only have a few minutes to speak, and people are here to try and understand what each candidate is saying, and they each have a right to say something. I'm timing what they're doing. I will stop them when they're only getting a maximum of 2 minutes. Some of them aren't taking it. We do not. Well, he was answering the question. He was asked what he thought was happening on the doors, and that's what he was telling us. Now, will you stop shouting out, or I'll ask you to leave the room.
Ask me on the doorstep. With respect, you're not with me on the doorstep. I was asked what comes up on
Alan,
the doorstep.
We're going to move on, and Caroline, would you like to?
I'm scared to bloody talk. Well, I just go. Oh, I've not started yet. Get on. No, I've actually forgotten part of the question, but I know I was selected by UKIP just at the end of February, but I've been gunning for Argyll and Bute for a while, so it was a privilege when I got selected. I've been all over Argyll and Bute. Obviously my family live in Dunoon, and one of their biggest gripes is a ferry, and I hear it all the time. The walk-on, walk-off ferry, it's a nightmare. And I do believe it is a devolved issue, so there's not much anyone in Westminster can do about it anyway. It's the Scottish Government that's responsible for that. It is the Scottish Government. It's not a Westminster issue, it's a Scottish Government issue. The prices for a car and 3 passengers was over £50 to come over, return and go back. That's criminal. That's really, really, really expensive if you buy it on the ferry. You know, but if you're a tourist, but it's the only. Stop hackling me. It's the only service offered from Bute to Dunoon. They monopolise that, so they can charge what they want. That's the problem I have with it. It should be put out to tender. They've spent millions on that pier for a walk-on, walk-off ferry. What for? It's not good to man their beast. You can't get a car on it, and it's as soon as there's a bit of a wind, it's off. It's not good for the tourist industry at all. And walking around Dunoon, nothing's changed in the past 20 years. There should be, you know, I'm a big fan of getting out of the European Union. I think if we got out of the European Union, that's one of UKIP's main policies, is getting out of the European Union. We'd said £52 million a day. If we get out of that, we'll have more money to invest in infrastructure in rural areas. And as for broadband and mobile phone signal, I've been hearing that for about 15 years. That's never happened. That's fine, that's enough before I get lynched.
Thanks, Caroline. Right, I'm going to ask you once again to stop shouting out. In a few minutes, we're going to be stopping and opening it up to the audience. You'll get a chance to put your hand up and ask a question. But if you shout out, then nobody hears anything. The candidates are here to try and put their case to you. You're here to listen to them. I would ask you to listen to them. And then if you've got a question, when it comes to the open question time, please put your hand up. Can we finish off with you, Alastair?
Yeah, no problem. Well, I was selected during the referendum, and around about that time, it's all everyone talked about on the doorstep. And even now, I hear concerns about infrastructure, ferries, broadband, mobile phones. Absolutely, that's true. But on the doorstep, this is the truth, when I knock on doors, people do still have concerns about the referendum and it not being final. You may not like that, but that's what I'm hearing. Now, I wasn't really going to talk much about the referendum, but some of the hecklers here made me feel I have to out of principle. Okay? I can, as can any candidate here, criticize a political party if they feel like it, and if people on the doorstep have the same concerns that we do. We have every right to. The question is, what have people said to you on the doorstep? What are the concerns being raised in Argyll and Bute? And that is a concern being raised in Argyll and Bute. Argyll and Bute has been sidelined. It doesn't matter what your politics are, you knock on every door and we feel like we're sidelined here. It's unacceptable that we're sidelined, and that has to be sorted. More power has to be devolved locally. More power has to be brought to the people at a local level. Not giving more power to technocrats in Edinburgh or London or any inner city-based organisation. We need real local devolution here in Argyll and Bute, and that will fix some of our infrastructure problems, but not all. We also need to see the Barnett formula, which is given to Scotland for rural constituencies, spent in rural constituencies, and not squandered on tram lines that go to nowhere in places like Edinburgh. So I would like to see real power being brought to the people here in Argyll and Bute. That's what I'm hearing on the doorstep. Yes, concerns about the referendum not being settled. Yes, criticism of the Nationalist Party, which they have every right to do. And concerns about infrastructure. And I'll happily mention any one of them anytime, and I don't care who shouts me down.
Thank you, Alastair. Time's wearing on, and I want to get the meeting opened up to the floor. So I'm going to have one final question, pre-submitted question, which comes from David Graham of Dunoon, and he asks, if elected to Westminster as our next MP, what would be your 3 main priorities for the people living in Argyll and Bute constituency? Can I ask Brendan O'Hara to come in on that one first?
I think the priorities for Argyll and Bute are in many ways the priorities for Scotland generally. I think specifically though that we need to reverse the steady depopulation of Argyll and Bute. We have an ageing population and we have a declining population, and it is a serious structural problem for us. I think things are being done. I think transport network is improving. As someone who for the last 3, 4, 5 months has been across the rest and be thankful so many times I've lost count. The fact that it has remained intact is a blessed relief. I know there's an awful lot of money being invested into it. I think we have seen one of Europe's biggest infrastructure projects being done and rolling out high-speed broadband. It can't come quick enough. I accept it can't come quick enough, but it is happening. When people leave Argyll and Bute, whether it was to college or wherever, it's very difficult to get them back. And it's once they get into the central belt, then high-speed broadband becomes like a utility, because that's what it is now regarded as a utility, and rightly so. And we will not attract our young people to come back if we don't have high-speed broadband and decent mobile communications, and we will not attract businesses and families to move here and stay here. So that's one of the main problems we have to address. But I think secondly, the problem of austerity really hits rural communities extremely hard. I think the austerity agenda being pursued by the last government has, as it's meant to do, hurt the poorest hardest. And there's a quote I use from Gandhi quite a lot, which says that the measure of a society is how it treats the poorest and the most vulnerable in its society. And so what does that say about the United Kingdom in 2015, when 1 in 4 of our children are born into poverty, when 220,000 of our children are born to fail, with immediately disadvantaged in health, in education and future job prospects? But it doesn't have to be that way. It doesn't have to be that children are hurt by economic policies pursued in London. And that is the main thrust of the SNP's campaign. It says that austerity has to end. We have to invest in our communities, we have to invest in public services, and we have to stop those children sliding further and further into poverty.
Thanks, Brendan.
Yep, that sounded great, considering you've been in power now for 8 years and food banks have been increased now. That's really good. Anyway, again, I just have to stress, there's no magic wand here, but I do strongly believe that there's no money in the purse left. The SNP can't guarantee anything, neither can Labour. The only way we can guarantee more money in the purse is an exit from the EU. It is as simple as that, literally simple as that. And that's all I've got to say on the issue, really. If we had more money, we could, end food banks, end children being born into poverty and all the rest of it. It'd be great, wouldn't it? And create more affordable housing. You know?
Thank you. Mary.
I'm going to do about what? Sorry. Well, I can't hear you. I can't hear you because of the mic.
You're not, hey, we're not taking
just told
questions
you.
at the moment.
Yep, sorry.
Okay?
That's all right.
I'm taking questions after this question's answered. Thank you, Mary.
Okay. What other candidates here have done is describe problems. We know that the population has been declining. It's been happening for a long time. We know that there are issues with welfare. What I think is really needed, though, is a clear plan to do something about it. And the three things I believe that we really need are jobs to keep people here. We need public services that aren't withdrawn and aren't centralised in the way the health service. We have hospitals that don't have beds in them, wards that are now lying empty or turned into offices. The removal of public services, in particular NHS services, from Argyll and Bute to the Central Belt is unacceptable. GP practices can't recruit GPs. We've got a GP crisis as well in many parts of Argyll and Bute. So we need more and better jobs that pay secure wages and that are in themselves secure. We need public services back here in Argyll and Bute. We have had an SNP government for 8 years and they have presided over this drift of jobs away from Argyll and Bute. It's not acceptable. And we need investment. We need investment. And let me tell you that the Scottish Government set aside £1 billion anti-poverty fund. It disappeared. It was never spent. Last year, 444 million was kept aside and not spent. So the money has been there, but choices have been made. And I think they're the wrong choices. Argyll and Bute has too often ended up on the wrong end of these bad decisions. We need concerted effort, people working together. MSPs, MPs and councils need to stop throwing stones at each other. They need to sit down round a table and work together to get jobs, services and investment in Argyll and Bute. Thank you.
Thank you, Mary. Alan.
Okay, three things. I would carry on with the good work that we did in government over the last 5 years. On top of the £800 tax cut for workers on low and middle incomes, I would deliver another £400 tax cut for income tax cut for workers on low and middle incomes. That would give people more money to spend in local shops and businesses and stimulate the local economy. For pensioners, I would write into law the triple lock guarantee. That's the guarantee that means the state pension rises every year in line with whatever is the highest of the increase in average wages, the rate of inflation, or 2.5%. And that delivered a state pension increase double the rate of inflation this year. Thirdly, I would finish off the job of delivering superfast broadband and 4G mobile phone coverage to the whole of Argyll and Bute. A lot of the infrastructure work has already been carried out, the cables laid. What's to happen now is the connecting up. And Dunoon is to be connected up in June, and we must carry on that to the rural villages round about, because to a modern economy, we desperately need superfast broadband and 4G mobile phone coverage.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Alan. And Alastair, finally.
Yes, well, all of the things I'm discussing, my three topics, fall into the population decline. I believe in infrastructure, economy, and of course, local power. Now, the economy, both nationally and locally, has to be growing. We can't have an economy based solely on banking sector and rear echelon public sector salaries. We need to see local businesses grow. Now, too often I'll see people complain about the high street in decline, yet they themselves won't use the high street. I myself run a small store and I know what it can be like. We need to see small local businesses that employ people locally grow in our communities and not see the death of the high street in Argyll. We need the infrastructure to back it up. Where I come from on the island of Islay, and of course all of Argyll and Bute, is a tax revenue breadbasket for Scotland. Make no mistake about that. We produce some of the best tax revenue going with our distilleries, our rich farms, fisheries, estates, you name it. And it's the same here in Dunoon. Vast sums of tax revenue go up and down the roads all the time, yet your roads are falling into dilapidation. It is unacceptable. We need broadband, we need mobile phones. The issue is, you're asking me as a parliamentary candidate, many of those things are devolved, but I will put pressure on all of the bodies, because it angers you, it certainly angers me as well. Every time I go upstairs to my bedroom, I'm apparently in Southern Ireland according to Vodafone, and it drives me nuts. On top of that, local devolution. Like I've said before, too much power is in the centre. Too many ivory tower elitists preside over us from an urban environment with no notion of how things are in rural Scotland. That has to stop. We need to, like I've said before, have real local power in Argyll and Bute and local representation. And only with the Conservative and Unionist Party will you see that, because we believe in devolving power to the individual, not just giving more power to Edinburgh. Thank you.
Thank you very much. We're going to move on now to taking questions from the floor, and we have the hands are shooting up. Keep the hands up. We've got microphones for you to speak, so if you wait till the microphone comes to you, I would ask you to restrict yourselves to a single question. Don't ask multiple questions, because that way you give these people the chance to say what they like. So you stick to your question, and I will ask them to stick to the answer to that question. And if we try and keep it as brief as we can, panel, so that we can get as many questions in as possible. Gentlemen in here.
These nuclear weapons.
Can you speak to the microphone, please, so that everybody can hear?
Those nuclear weapons that are based a few miles from us here.
Sorry, could you give your name?
William Dinsmore.
Thank you, William.
I'm a Green Party member and a member of the local CND group.
That's better.
So,
Now, question.
These weapons of mass destruction, these nuclear weapons in the Clyde, they're illegal and immoral. And they're not just an act of war, they're a war crime.
Is it a question or is it a statement you're making?
I'm just going to come into the question. It's a war crime, and it's 1.7 million people are used as a human shield. Now that's diabolical. I remember I asked the Conservative member for Parliament around 1970, why was this done?
Well, look, what's the question, please? Well, other people want to get their questions in too. Would you ask your question?
Just give us an answer, that's all.
An answer to what?
That question of nuclear weapons.
What do you want to know about nuclear weapons?
Get them out. It's not just a matter. It's not just a matter.
You want rid of them, do you?
It's not just a matter of voting against them.
Well, you obviously want rid of them.
Now.
Is there any particular candidate you want to ask a question of?
Please ask me.
Well, the Unionist candidates particularly.
I can quickly answer that for UKIP. We're in favour of nuclear weapons, given the fragile environment that we're living in now, with big power monsters like Putin and all the rest of them. So we're in favour of nuclear, and the 3,500 jobs that will be lost at Bass Lane.
Right, thank you. Alan, do you want to come in?
Well, we should be doing our utmost to negotiate worldwide nuclear disarmament. But until we can achieve that aim, and I think we need to keep our own nuclear weapons, because we cannot foresee the threats that will arise over the next 50 years. And the proposal that Parliament's going to be debating next year is whether or not to renew the Vanguard submarines that carry the Trident missiles, because they're reaching the end of their lives. And I do believe that we have to renew those submarines, because if you think, I'm old enough to remember 1965, and we could not predict what would happen in the next 50 years, the collapse of the Cold War, the disintegration of the Middle East. We cannot predict the threats that may arise over the next 50 years. So until we can negotiate worldwide nuclear disarmament, we should keep our nuclear deterrent. Now, to put the cost in context, the cost to Scotland is £200 million a year that would be saved. Now, bearing in mind that we're ready, just put that in context, the SNP proposal in this election is to take £7.6 billion out of the Scottish economy. So by not renewing Trident, they would only reduce that deficit to £7.4 billion. And that £200 million is also less than John Swinney's underspend in the Scottish Parliament. So that puts the cost into context.
Mary.
I'd like to see a world free of nuclear weapons as well. The way I believe you achieve it is by negotiating them away. And here's why. There are over 17,000 nuclear weapons right now in the hands of 9 countries. 3 of them are in NATO, France, the USA and Britain. We only have around about 200 of those 17,265 by my calculations. If we get into proper multilateral negotiations, the way we have done in the past, this number is lower than it used to be, We don't just get rid of the 200 odd that we have, we get rid of 400 or 600. That's what makes the world safer, not us giving away ours and leaving 8 countries, only 2 of them in NATO, with weapons, but working with the other countries. The other countries being Russia, China, Pakistan, India, Israel and North Korea. If they all hang on to their weapons while we unilaterally give ours away, I don't think the world becomes safer. I want all of us ultimately to get rid of our weapons. Negotiation works. We've done international negotiations with chemical, biological, landmines, other weapons. Even back in the 1800s, we got rid of exploding bullets before one had ever been shot in a St. Petersburg Treaty. International agreements do work and are the way forward.
Will you stop shouting out, please? We'll take questions. And I see your hand up. Will you sit down, please? Because you're interrupting the speaker. Will you please sit down and be quiet for the moment? You have your hand up. If I want to ask you, I'll ask you to speak. Nobody's paying any attention to you. Before you speak, this lady here has had a hand up for a while. Is it a comment on what we're talking about? No. Well, that's all. It's a separate question. We'll come back to that. Can you wind up where
Yes,
you are?
absolutely.
Yeah,
I believe that we get rid of more weapons if we do it multilaterally, in the way we have done in the past. And I'm sorry, Madam, but I didn't fully understand, I didn't fully hear your point, but I'd be more than happy to talk to you later to explain my position. Thank you very much.
Final point from Alastair.
And yeah, I am proud to be of a party that wants to completely renew Trident, because we live in an uncertain world. Look at Putin, who I don't admire, by the way, who annexed a section of Ukraine, the Crimea, whose thugs right now create civil war in Ukraine. And then there's the crisis in the Middle East. We live in uncertain times and we have to have a deterrent. And what I would say, sir, is you're from the Green Party, is that correct? Yes? Are you from the Green Party? Yeah? Well, why didn't you run a candidate for Argyll and Bute? If you're so keen to voice your opinion, why didn't you field a candidate? Because you'd get to have a Green candidate right here. It's easier to stand on the sidelines and shout rather than field a candidate. Oh, is that what it was? You don't have the resources to field a candidate in Argyll and Bute. I don't believe that, sir. I think it's just easier for you to stand on the sidelines and shout.
Alastair,
enough! Hey!
Yeah. I am proud to support our nuclear deterrent, proud to maintain it, and I'm very surprised the Greens didn't field a candidate for Argyll and Bute.
Thanks, Alastair. This lady here has a question.
Chair, could I get an answer on
I think
Trident?
I was going to actually say we all probably know your position. The question was to the unionist candidates.
I really
Can you be
do.
brief?
I'll be as brief
Thank
as I
you,
can.
Brendan. Then we'll
because
take the
there's been as you know, my position in Trident is absolutely unequivocal. But let's talk about the context of the cost of Trident. Comic Relief this year celebrated its 30th birthday, and it celebrated by announcing that it had raised over those 30 years £1 billion for good causes. Comic Relief would have to fundraise for 3,000 years to pay for Trident. That's the cost of Trident. That's the cost that every single man, woman and child in this country will be expected to pay for weapons of mass destruction. And you cannot talk about negotiating arms away while arming yourself to the teeth. It's rank hypocrisy, and it is nonsense. There is no moral, there is no economic, and there is no military basis for Trident. It is the United Kingdom looking for a better yesterday. It's living its yesterdays out, and every single one of us will be paying through the nose for decades to come from it.
We've got a question over here.
Good evening, my name's Alison Mulholland, I live in Kames and Tynebrook. At the very opening, Alan Reid said he was proud of his record in government. I just want to know how proud he was when he voted to protect paedophile MPs and protecting them using the Official Secrets Act. And I would also like to ask all the other candidates, had they been the MP for Argyll and Bute, how would they have voted on that?
You've got to go to you, Alan, first.
That's why I voted against it.
I don't know what she has, sorry.
Child abuse is obviously a terrible crime, and many people's lives have been blighted by being victims of child abuse, and it's obvious that there have been, in many fields of society, including down at Westminster, there have been cover-ups where the perpetrators have been protected by powerful people. Now, the government has established an inquiry. It's being chaired by an eminent judge from New Zealand who clearly has no connection whatsoever with the British establishment. It's also very important that everybody knows that they are free from any threat of prosecution, or if they bring forward and give evidence to that.
Look, can you be quiet and let the candidate speak, please?
That they give evidence to that inquiry without any threat of prosecution or any other retribution. Now, the particular amendment that the lady was referring to was an amendment to the Official Secrets Act. Now, the Official Secrets Act defines an official secret as something that would put British people's lives in danger, particularly British troops serving abroad. Now, the Official Secrets Act says that it is an offence to reveal an official secret without lawful authority. Now, that without lawful authority is the important part of the Act, because the Prime Minister, the Home Secretary and the Solicitor General have all stated in Parliament that anyone who gives evidence to any child abuse inquiry will not be prosecuted under the Official Secrets Act. That's what gives the lawful authority for people to give that evidence, and even if that means revealing an official secret. Now, the particular amendment that was referred to would have meant that the law would have said that anybody giving that evidence was protected, but they're protected anyway because of the assurances given to Parliament giving the lawful authority to reveal that secret. Now, it's so important that people feel able to give details of child abuse and that they don't feel that there's any threat hanging over them. Now, the reason I didn't vote for the amendment was twofold. One, it wasn't necessary because the lawful authority was already there. Two, voting for that amendment would have meant signalling that I thought that the law as it stands at the moment meant that people were not protected. Now, that is a terrible message to give out. Now, those who are questioning how that vote went, I have no doubt are genuine. But it's important to bear in mind that the message that you're giving out is, if you say that that amendment was necessary, the message you're giving out is that people do have reason to fear if they give evidence. It's important to send out a clear signal that people have no reason to fear. And the authority of the Prime Minister, the Home Secretary and the Solicitor General means that the lawful authority is there, so people have no reason to fear. And now that people are aware of the facts, I hope that they will not continue to send out the message that people do have a reason to fear, because that is a very dangerous message for people to send out.
Yeah. Thanks, gentleman here in the T-shirt. Well, I think he's answered the question anyway. Gentleman in the T-shirt.
Hello, my name's Roddy Cairns. I'm from Dunoon. I have a question for the Conservative candidate. Part of Alan Reid's proud record in government was supporting your party introducing the bedroom tax. I want to know what advice you would give to one of your neighbours in Bowmore if they were told that their two-bedroom flat was too big and that they were going to have this abhorrent tax applied to it, and that the nearest available social house that was one bedroom was in Campbelltown. What advice would you give to them then?
Well, first of all, my neighbour wouldn't be in Bowmore. I actually got similar advice, oddly enough. I'm almost at the top of the list because of my circumstances. Although some of you may choose to heckle us, I am actually from a very poor background and am on the social housing list. What I would say is, I got an email, a rather amusing one, saying, I'm afraid we don't have any houses for you on Isla just yet. How do you feel about living on gear? Now, obviously, that is unacceptable. I'm sorry, what, sir? Well, actually, this is coming out of your time, not mine. I'm not going to have that taken off my 2 minutes. I'm allowed to give an explanation. I believe in the benefits reform. It's not a tax, it is the benefits reform. However, what I would say is too many local authorities do not have enough affordable housing available. And in each area it varies. For instance, in Bute, there is large amounts of people in houses that are too small. Whereas on Isla, there's too many single people in 3-bedroom houses. This is something that needs to be sought. However, the housing situation is devolved. It would not be a problem if there was more affordable housing available, more ACCA housing, more fine homes, and I would lobby to have that done. Thank you.
Thank you. Hand
Chair.
up, lady up here.
Chair, I was attacked by the questioner. Surely I get the right to respond.
Yeah, fair enough.
Sorry?
I was attacked by the questioner. Surely I have the right to reply.
I think we've dealt with this.
No, I'm sorry, Chair. I came to this Hustings meeting to answer questions. A member of the audience asked a question which attacked me personally. I surely have the right to reply to him.
I think you had 3 minutes to answer to it, Alan.
Chair, I came to this meeting in good faith, expecting to be allowed to answer questions that are put to me. That question, I was attacked by the questioner. I surely have the right to reply.
It wasn't the questioner, it was the lady that asked the question.
No, it was a gentleman in the blue shirt.
Oh, you'd mean about this particular
bedroom
point?
tax.
Oh, I'm sorry, I thought you were... No, yeah, sure.
Yeah, all right. Okay,
By all
thank you.
means.
Sorry.
Sorry, we're at cross purposes.
All right, okay, that's fine. Well, I voted against the bedroom tax. I voted against the bedroom tax for the very reasons that were talked about there being no alternative houses in small communities. I didn't just vote against the bedroom tax. I argued for more money for rural councils in order to offset the bedroom tax. I also argued for the bedroom tax to be devolved, and the bedroom tax has now effectively been devolved. And the current situation is that Argyll and Bute Council has been given enough money by both the UK government and the Scottish government in order to pay the bedroom tax on behalf of every tenant in social rented housing in Argyll and Bute. So my advice to the tenant in Bowmore would be get straight round to the council office and get your application in for a discretionary, what's called a discretionary housing payment, which will cover the bedroom tax for you. And I'd also be asking the question of the council why, when they were processing that individual's earlier benefit application, they hadn't given the discretionary housing payment automatically, because that's what they should have done.
The lady with the hand up here. Thanks, Gordon.
Hi there, I'd like to direct this at the Conservative chappie. Sorry, it's just how I speak. You're saying that your party wants to devolve authority amongst local communities, and that's only going to come about if the Conservatives get elected. But isn't that exactly what the Community Empowerment Bill that's going through Holyrood at the moment is going to do? That's going to empower the community to have more of a say and do in what happens at a local level. And it's not actually, in fact, coming from the Conservatives.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I'm someone who believes in bipartisanship. If there was a nationalist, Lib Dem, Labour, hell, even a UKIP idea I supported, I'd back it. The issue is with the Scottish Parliament, when they talk about local powers, and I think great, local powers, absolutely, I stay in the back end of nowhere, I'd like to see local powers. They have a terrible track record on local devolution. Our police force centralised, our health service centralised to Inverness. Everyone's taking flights to every God knows which area to get simple checks.
But the Community Empowerment Bill makes sure that it stays within the community.
Well, I'm afraid huge sections of the health service have been centralised. and huge amounts of flights are going on a regular basis from our local airport to Glasgow for 5-minute appointments, and I think that's unacceptable. I think there has to be real local devolution. If the Nationalists would actually achieving local devolution, that would be great, but their track record on it has been horrendous, and we in the Conservative Party have always pushed for local powers and local devolution.
Thanks, Alastair. Gordon, you want to let Gordon come in? He said his hand up for ages.
Thank you, Chair. Gordon Blair. In light of the situation in the Mediterranean, with migrants, men, women and children drowning every day, are you proud of the UK government's stance of cutting funding for rescue services? And what, if you are elected, are you going to do to help this appalling humanitarian disaster on Europe's doorstep?
Well, it is an appalling tragedy, of which there is no easy solution. These people are clearly have such miserable lives in their own countries that they are so frightened of their lives in their own countries that they're willing to risk their lives to flee to Europe in rickety boats. Now, the background to this is that the Italian government had been operating a search and rescue mission 2013-2014, but while they were operating that, to which the UK government had contributed, but during while they were operating that search and rescue, more and more people were fleeing. Now, the assessment made by the Italian government was that because people thought they would be rescued and taken to Italy, they were putting to sea in rickety boats, and the Italian government thought that if we draw back to our territorial waters, that will discourage people from taking to the sea. The EU as a whole, by a unanimous vote, decided to adopt that policy. So it wasn't just the UK government, it was the EU as a whole by unanimous vote. Now, clearly that assessment is wrong, because as we've seen over the last few days, people are still fleeing in rickety boats, even though they know there's no rescue service out there. So I think we do have to change policy and go back to the previous policy of having a proactive search and rescue service, but one operated by the whole EU. We can't just leave it all to the Italian government. And also, I mean, the Italian government is quite rightly concerned that as the current state of affairs, all the refugees that they rescue all end up at their responsibility. I think the whole of the EU has to take responsibility for looking after the refugees that are rescued. There's an emergency EU summit on Thursday, and I hope that the policy will be to go back to a proactive search and rescue funded by the whole EU, and if I was elected, then yes, that's the policy that I would be pursuing.
Thank you. Reid, would you like to comment?
Rescue them all now.
Rescue them all now, I agree.
Yes, that's that's what I said. That's exactly what I said. That's what I said. The EU should re-establish the proactive search and rescue service. I agree with you. That's exactly what I said.
Thanks, Alan. Mary, would you like to comment?
Yeah, I'd absolutely like to endorse it. It's a great question, Gordon. One of the things that's disappointed me about lots of the televised debates is that international affairs barely featured. Hundreds of people killed in Kenya, and all we were talking about was Jeremy Clarkson. And it's really, really disappointing, because these things are happening not that far away from us. We've got some legacy duties and some territorial duties and responsibilities that we absolutely need to live up to. I completely agree that for all sorts of reasons, primarily the humanitarian ones, as you just say, we've got to get these rescues going. No delay. It's urgent. It's only April and already these ships are sailing, so I completely agree. Rescue and looking after the people. And also, final point, is to actually try and tackle it at source, dealing with the communities whose plight is so dreadful that people leave their awful situations to try to go through that risk of crossing in unsafe vessels with really pretty ruthless and reckless pirates effectively that are taking extortionate amounts of money for them and setting them off in unsafe vessels. Big efforts got to be done in Libya and in the countries of origin to make sure it's tackled there as well.
Thanks, Benny. Does anybody want to add anything? You would like to speak? Yep. Okay, Alastair.
Well, we're all, no matter what our political colours, humanists. No one wants to see boats of people sink and people drown at sea. The way to really break this is to get to the traffickers. They're the ones making money off of days and innocent people's blood, and this has to be stopped. The traffickers must be brought to justice. One way or the other, we have to stop the traffickers. And there has to be, you're heckling, there has to be a European-wide response to this because it's a European-wide issue, if not a worldwide issue. So I would very much like to see this situation fixed. It can't be done overnight, and the traffickers have to be brought to justice. They're the ones that are getting away with this piracy right now, and it must stop.
Okay. Brendan.
I think the whole tragic situation brings shame onto the EU and it brings shame on the UK. We have abandoned compassion. What did they honestly think would happen when they withdrew the search and rescue? Did they honestly think that those poor, desperate people would suddenly know that their chances of being picked up by a rescue boat, that would somehow change their mind? They knew that the boats would continue to sail, and they deliberately withdrew the search and rescue. It was an abdication of basic humanity, and I think it shames us all. We have a legal responsibility to help refugees. The European Union has a legal responsibility. It says it's there to help refugees. And yet, the conversation, when you scratch away the surface, I find, is all about the cost of doing it. Let's be frank and let's not beat about the bush. This is because we're talking about poor Africans. It is a disgrace. Our basic humanity has been sold out, and I think we should be ashamed of ourselves. And we have to get the search and rescue reinstated, and we have to take in poor refugees fleeing a desperate, desperate situation. Now, how desperate would you have to be to climb onto that boat with your children, facing that journey, and to turn your back on them is unthinkable.
Caroline, do you want to comment?
Fine, we've
You're
touched
fine.
on pretty
This
much
gentleman in here, Gordon's had his hand up for ages.
Victor Allen from Argyll Head. Can I have the candidates' views on tactical voting, or is it a fact that they don't believe their own manifestos when they suggest this?
Right.
I never heard the question.
Yeah.
Tactical voting.
Let's carry on.
I mean, on this subject of tactical voting, what? That was the question, wasn't it?
Oh, was it me? What the hell? I never heard him. Sorry, sit down, Alastair.
No, you said you didn't. No, you said you didn't want to speak at the previous point.
I didn't want to make a comment about the previous
That's
question,
right.
but I'm happy to answer that.
Hang
For
on.
me, tactical voting.
Caroline,
I'm not for tactical
we'll come to you. Just sit down
I don't
just
know.
now.
I don't know who the question was
We're
aimed at. I
answering
thought
this
he said
question about
UKIP.
tactical voting.
Okay, I will happily answer your question on tactical voting, my friend. As it stands, I can quite easily run on the tactical voting banner. Scotland's Big Voice, all the pan-union groups, the Daily Mail, they all recommend voting Conservative and Unionist in this constituency to keep the SNP out. It's a fact. Scotland's Big Voice, which have nothing to do with us, have their own leaflets out. They've distributed thousands in Hillsborough. They have their own activists come in from Glasgow, telling people to vote Conservative in this constituency to keep the SNP out and prevent another referendum. That's their view, not mine. Before you start heckling, I personally believe that we do have broad support from all unionists. You only have to look at the new HQ opened up in Helmsburgh, in the former Yes Shop, I might add, that is staffed and run by Labour and Lib Dem people who have said themselves that they never thought they'd be voting Conservative, never mind canvassing Conservative. We are the real party of the union here in Argyll, and we're proud of it. That said, I also have many support, on the islands in particular, from some Yes voters and some nationalists. In fact, many traditional nationalists aren't too happy about the direction their party has taken since the referendum. Well, you're laughing, but it's true. I would happily be a voice for all unionists here in Argyll and Bute. And I would say to all unionists, don't squander your vote on the other unionist parties. It is a wasted vote. Thank you.
Caroline, would you like to come in on tactical voting?
You demand.
That's fine, that's fine.
Well, perhaps, Caroline, you could pick up both at the same time and respond to the tactical voting
No, that's
as
fine.
well.
With regard to refugee status and asylum status, we're very proud of that. UKIP have no issues with refugees or asylum seekers. We welcome them. That's never been an issue for UKIP. Our policy is about border control. That does not have any impact on refugee status or asylum seekers at all. Totally different.
If you've got a question, will you put your hand up? And she's
hear you.
already trying to answer the
I
question.
can't hear what she said.
It doesn't really matter. You can move on to the tactical voting now. I'll take if you're asked to speak.
Refugees and asylum seekers, yes, they'll be granted. Yes, absolutely.
Can you please
yes,
sit down? We've
yes.
really not got a lot of time left.
That's never been an issue.
Caroline, just a moment. Can you sit down, please? We don't have a lot of time left, and there's loads of other people with their hands up. Tactical voting.
No, I'm not a fan of tactical voting, end of. On principle, vote who you want. Not to keep the SNP out, not to keep the Conservatives in that have messed up already anyway. I'm not a fan of tactical voting. It's just a principle thing for me. Vote who you feel you want to vote for.
Really, tactical voting.
I know that the last person is the one that most of this question is aimed at, because as everyone will know, there are endless leaflets coming in about two-horse races, and it absolutely isn't a two-horse race. I know from all our canvassing, which has been going on for a long time, I told you I was the first candidate here selected, that there are lots of people who feel utterly betrayed by the Lib Dems. Lots of young people who will not take ever the step to vote again. People are actually really upset by the fact that promises were made. In 2010, we were promised a new type of politics by Nick Clegg. There was Nick Clegg fever, Lib Dem fever, and then they found in Argyll and Bute that they voted Lib Dem in many cases to keep out the Tories, and the very opposite happened. So, in my experience, it's not a two-horse race. In my experience, what you'll see in my leaflets is a positive case for voting for Labour and voting for me. And I think that was also the other key point in your thing. All of the materials I've given you, all what I've tried to say tonight is a positive case for voting me. Born and bred in Argyll. I'm not a newcomer here. I've not suddenly leapt in the back of another agenda and thought, oh, I might win, because, the SNP's on the up, I'll try Argyll and Bute. I first stood on the Highlands and Islands list in 1999. And therefore was a candidate here. My commitment to here is total, and I think that one of the things you want to consider is that we're putting forward a positive agenda, because it's either a Labour or a Tory government, and you've got a candidate that knows the place and has stood here and is passionate about our prospects. Thank you.
Right. Thank you, Mary. We're really fast running out of time. Can Alan just be very brief on tactical voting, and then Brendan, and I'll take one more question after that.
I hate the first past the post system. I believe in proportional representation, because if you have proportional representation, you can vote for the candidates or the party you want, and the more people that vote for that candidate or party, the more candidates from that party get elected. But Tory and Labour believe in the first past the post system, and the first past the post system inevitably means tactical voting. If your candidate's not in with a chance, you have a choice of voting for them and not influencing the result, or you have a choice of influencing the result. In Tory Labour marginals up and down the country, Tory and Labour candidates are putting out endless leaflets saying it's a two-horse race. David Cameron and Ed Miliband are constantly saying it's a two-horse race at national level, that you have to either vote for one or the other. So we have the first past the post system. I don't like it, but the rules of the first past the post system are that you have, if you want your vote to influence the result, you have to vote for one of the two candidates who's in with a chance. Surprise, surprise, the Daily Mail says vote Tory, Alastair says.
As does Scotland's big one.
But it's obvious in this election that Brendan is putting on a strong challenge, and that the election is between myself as the sitting MP and Brendan as the incumbent. Now, references have been made to endless leaflets. Think how few leaflets you got from the Tory and Labour parties. That's because it's not a target seat for them. They're putting out very few leaflets. You're getting a lot of leaflets from us because it is a target seat. It's clearly a contest between myself and Brendan, and I would urge you to decide which of the two of us you think is best placed to be your MP and vote for one of us. I hope it'll be me, but vote for either myself or Brendan, because we're the two that are in the contest.
Thanks,
here.
Alan.
Nonsense.
Brendan.
I think just very, very briefly, tactical voting happens organically. You can't tell people to vote tactically. People aren't stupid. People in Scotland have been voting tactically since 1983, if not earlier. When Mrs Thatcher, but when there was a move to wipe the Tories out of Scotland, nobody needed leaflets to go around the doors and say, vote X in this constituency, vote Y in that constituency. People knew, because people aren't stupid. People know what they want. So, tactical vote, that's entirely up to the individual. But what I would say, I don't think it is in the gift of any party to organise a tactical vote. Vote for the person you want. Vote for the person that you believe in, that more aligns with what you want to see a society be. That's how you should vote. That's how it's always been done. And I would encourage you to continue that.
Thanks, Brendan. I'm afraid we've reached the time when we can't take any more questions. I'm really sorry, because there's loads of hands up. It's a wee bit like David Dimbleby on a Thursday night, looking at all these hands that are up, and I just wish we could have a few more, but it is 9 o'clock and we do have to finish up. There isn't another hour, we have to be out. No, there isn't time for one more question, I'm sorry. The candidates are going to wrap up. They're going to have 2 minutes to just try and encapsulate everything they've heard and that we've heard, and try and win your vote in 2 minutes. And we're going to come back down the line from the order in which they spoke at the beginning. So I'm going to ask Alan Reid of the Liberal Democrats to take it first.
As I opened by saying how proud I was of what the Liberal Democrats have achieved in government, the £800 tax cut, higher pensions, and we have half the deficit. The job is half done. It's important that we concentrate on that job for the next 5 years. We don't get distracted into debates about constitutional change. We had our debate on the Constitution last year. As a result, independence was rejected. All 5 parties then got together and set up the Smith Commission, which will devolve significant powers to Scotland. What I want to do is implement the Smith Agreement. That will give far more powers to Scotland. Also importantly, retaining the Barnett formula. Where I differ from Brendan is Brendan wants to do away with the Barnett formula and rely purely on Scotland's oil revenues, which are fast disappearing. That would mean £7.6 billion less for Scotland to spend. I reject that. I want to keep the Barnett formula. During my time in Parliament, I have stood up for Argyll and Bute. I have kept my promises. I voted against tuition fees. I promised to vote against any rise in them. I did so. I voted against the bedroom tax. I vote the way I think is best for Argyll and Bute. I'm not a party automaton. I speak the way I think is best. Now, for the next Parliament, we want to cut income tax by another £400 for those in low and middle incomes. We'll bring in another £6 billion by a crackdown on tax avoidance, a fully costed plan for £8 billion more for the NHS, income tax down, pensions up, more jobs. That's our record in government. Re-elect Liberal Democrats to finish off the job.
Thank you, Alan. We've only got 8 minutes to go. We've only got 8 minutes to go. Will you just sit quietly now and let them wind up and try and sell themselves to you for the last 8 minutes? Then you can nobble them in the way out. Mary, would you
Not
like
all
to?
at once. Okay. My commitment to Argyll and Bute is absolute. I'm a candidate here this year, but I've been a candidate here before. So I'm not just a newcomer, not just somebody who's parachuted in. I'm here because I want to be here. Sorry? Where do I live? I live just about 3 or 4 miles outside the Helensburgh end of the constituency. However, I think you'll find that many MPs in lots of areas have lived outside the constituency where they're representing, and that applies to all parties. Alan didn't live here when he was first elected here, but it doesn't...
Yes, I did.
Alan was a councillor in Renfrewshire.
Well, that was 25 years ago.
And then you were elected here not long after that. The point is that I understand every corner of this area, and I'm glad I took your heckle, because what I can demonstrate is that I don't favour any one area or another. I can get to where I live, I can get to Dunoon and Rothsay in no time at all. I'm near the Erskine Bridge, I can get to Oban and that end of the constituency quickly. I can fly to Isla and Tidey. I am very accessible for every part of the constituency, which is great because I know it all so well. Is this a time for hecklers or not? Do I respond to that?
No, you better use your time for yourself, Mary.
My commitment here is total, and people have obviously made up their mind, but what I'd like to remind everybody is that you have a choice here, a really clear choice of somebody who has not just been parachuted in, somebody who's always cared about this place and always been committed to it, standing on a set of policies that mean we don't need to have another 5 years of the Tories, to have somebody who's going to be standing on a platform of policies that will work for Argyll and Bute. Things like 1,000 more nurses and midwives and 500 more GPs to help restore local services, which have been so cruelly dismantled in recent years. So my commitment is to bring my skills, my knowledge, my ability to get things done, to stand up and speak for the people of Argyll and Bute, whose voices are never heard enough. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mary. Caroline.
Okay, we need change. UKIP offer that change. A future for Scotland at the heart of the United Kingdom. Good, well, you'll hear it again. A United Kingdom free from the tyranny of the EU. Liberating ourselves from bureaucracy and red tape. Repatriating our fishing grounds. A British agricultural policy for British farmers. More money for the health service without raising taxes or more borrowing, and no tax on the minimum wage. It's time to get our country back, and it's time to vote UKIP and give us a chance. All the rest of them have had their turn. Thank you.
Thank you, Caroline. Brendan.
Maybe I should put that. I actually haven't been parachuted in from anywhere. I've lived in the constituency for 11 years. The difference is between you and me, Mary. I choose to live in the constituency, you choose not to. And if you believe that Bishopton is near Helensburgh, then perhaps there's a career for you in EasyJet.
I'll tell Brendan, there's a geography lesson there as well.
Have been good for Scotland. I think we have shown our track record in government, albeit in extremely trying circumstances, that we are a party of responsible government. And we can take that to Westminster to work collaboratively with other progressive forces across the United Kingdom. We're not there to wreck, we're not there to obstruct, but what we are there to do is make sure that what was promised to Scotland is delivered to Scotland, and delivered to Scotland in full. We're also there to make sure that any incoming government doesn't pursue the vicious austerity agenda to which they are all currently signed up. We will campaign to our last breath against the renewal of the obscene, the immoral and the economically insane private missile system.
what will you do with the remaining site?
So what you have on May the 7th is a chance to vote for a future, vote for hope, and that vote is the Scottish National Party.
Thank you very much, Brendan. Can I just ask you to bear with us now? We have the final speaker, Alastair Redman.
It's like pantomime.
Well, I mean, it seems like every candidate has put forward their family tree and reasons for being in Argyll. What I would say is I am 28 years old, and I've been in Argyll 28 years. I went to my local primary school before it was shut down in '98. Thank you very much, New Labour. And on top of that, I went to Argyll High School.
Council?
Oh, maybe it was devolved by that stage.
It was the council.
In any case, exactly, no heckler. But I also went to the local high school and worked as a farm labourer on one of the local farms and run a local business in Argyll and Bute. I couldn't be any more Argyll and Bute. And with my many brothers, and there's too many of them to count, married into all the largest families in Argyll and Bute, I now have distant relatives in every corner of Argyll, which is one of the reasons why my better half is from Shetland. What I would say is there is real need for change in Argyll and Bute. There's no doubt about that. I think the Lib Dem policies are frankly stale. I think they've been in far too long. I don't think that a Labour candidate is best suited to represent a rural constituency. I think they're an urban-based political group. And I think that you do all want change. On top of that, the Nationalists will continue to push for a centralised agenda. More power to Edinburgh. They'll talk about it. More power to Scotland, more power to Scotland. What they really mean is more power to Edinburgh. I want to give... You like that bill, and I hope it works.
It's more power to Brussels, that's what they'll give you.
Yeah. Well, again, I mean, I'm afraid all you've done is heckle, but the more you heckle, the more I'm going to stand here and talk, because it doesn't come out of my time. It's that simple.
No. You're interrupting a final speech. Can you be quiet, please? Please, will you let him speak? He's trying to finish up, and it's a winding up speech. The questions are finished.
Well, you are.
You can't speak every time any of us trying to make a comment.
It's heckling.
That's what it is.
That's what it is. That's what it is.
That's what it is, and we're about to get kicked out. So can he finally wind up, please? Thank you very much.
As it stands, I feel, despite what some of the vocal minorities say, that it is time for the right kind of change in Argyll and Bute. We need more local power. We need power devolved to local, rural constituencies, and Argyll and Bute for far too long has been overlooked. And I hope that you will vote for me to see that change, to put rural Scotland and rural Argyll back on the map. I want to see rural representation at a UK level for Argyll and Bute, and by electing me, you will have that. Thank you. Cheers.
Thanks very much, Alastair, and thank you to all 5 candidates tonight. I hope you have enjoyed the evening. I would say I'm sorry that we didn't get taking as many questions as we would like. I'm sure that there were plenty of other very good questions out there, but perhaps you'd be good enough to show your appreciation for all 5 candidates standing here and putting up with you shouting at them. Thank you.
And ladies and gentlemen, thanks to the chair as well. Thank you all for coming this evening, ladies and gentlemen. And we'll see you again at this time next year for the Scottish Parliament election, Hustings. Thank you, good night.